Jacob Miller slammed the brakes so hard the tires screamed against the wet asphalt, and the woman in his passenger seat threw both hands against the dashboard. "Don't stop here," Hannah gasped. "Please, they're following us." He hadn't even known her name 3 hours ago. Now she was staring out the back window, like something in the dark was hunting them both. "Take me somewhere private," she whispered. "Somewhere nobody knows you." And Jacob, a widowed father who hadn't broken a single rule in 43 years, turned the wheel and disappeared into the rain. Before we go on, tell me in the comments what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels tonight. And if you believe the quiet ones carry the heaviest secrets, subscribe and stay with me until the very end. The rain hadn't started yet when Jacob Miller loosened his tie in the parking lot of the Riverside Convention Hall and told himself he could go home now. He'd stayed exactly 40 minutes longer than he wanted to. That was the rule with company events. Show your face, shake the right hands, let the district manager see you smiling, then leave before the wine made everyone honest. He was reaching for his keys when he heard the voice behind him. "Excuse me, Mr. Miller." He turned. It was the new woman from accounting. He'd seen her maybe 3 times in the 6 weeks since she'd started. She always sat at the far end of the break room, always left before anyone could ask her a question. "Just Jacob," he said. "Nobody calls me Mr. Miller unless I'm in trouble." She didn't smile. "Hannah Brooks." This is embarrassing. My ride fell through. The rideshare app says 40 minutes and it's about to storm, and I heard you live out near Millwood." "I do. I'm on Argonne. It's on your way. I'll pay for gas. I promise. She stopped herself. "I don't like being stranded." Jacob looked at her for a moment. There was something in the way she held her purse against her chest, both arms like a shield. He'd seen that posture before. Emma stood like that the first month after her mother died, holding her backpack against her stomach at the school door like it could keep the world out. "Get in," he said. "Gas is on me. Company's already paid me too little to let a coworker drown in a parking lot." That got the smallest curve out of her. Not a smile. The memory of one. She climbed into the passenger seat of his 10-year-old Ford, and he noticed she buckled her seatbelt before the door was even fully closed. "You always this careful?" he asked, pulling out of the lot. "Lately," she said. He let it go. He wasn't a man who pried. God knew he hated when people pried at him. For the first 10 minutes, it was ordinary, almost pleasant. He asked her where she'd moved from, and she said, Portland. And he asked why she'd come to Spokane, and she said a change of scenery, and he could tell it was a lie, but it was the kind of small, polite lie people told strangers, so he let that go too. "You've got a kid," she said suddenly. He glanced at her. "How'd you know that?" She pointed at the small pink hair tie looped around his gear shift. "That's not yours, unless there's a whole side to you I don't know about." Jacob laughed, a real one, surprising himself. "That's Emma's. She's 10. She leaves those things everywhere. I find them in my coat pockets in the coffee filters one time inside my work boot. I've stopped fighting it. 10's a good age. 10 is a spy in a training bra who thinks I don't know she stays up reading with a flashlight." He shook his head. "She's the best thing I ever did. The only thing I did right if you ask some people." "Who's the some people?" He kept his eyes on the road. "My mother-in-law, mostly. She thinks a man can't raise a girl alone." "And what do you think?" "I think," Jacob said slowly, "that I'm still standing, and so is Emma, and that's more than a lot of people manage." Hannah went quiet. He figured he'd said too much. Then she said very softly, "Your wife. 3 years this October. Cancer." He said it the way he always said it, now flat, worn, smooth a stone he'd carried so long it had stopped cutting his hand. "You learned to say it without your voice breaking. Took me about 2 years. I'm sorry. Everybody is." He softened it. "Thank you. I mean that. Most people just look at their shoes." She turned to look out her window then, and the first fat drops of rain hit the windshield 1, 2, then 100, and he flicked the wipers on. That was when he noticed she'd started watching the side mirror. He didn't think much of it at first. People watched mirrors. But she wasn't watching the road. She was watching one specific pair of headlights 3 cars back, and when Jacob changed lanes to pass a slow truck, she twisted around in her seat and watched to see if the headlights changed lanes too. They did. "Hannah," he said carefully, "you okay? Turn here. That's not the way to Argonne. Please just turn." He turned, right onto Trent away from her street, and the headlights stayed with them, and he watched her face go the color of old paper. "Talk to me," Jacob said, and his voice had changed. It had the same low steadiness it got when Emma woke up screaming from a nightmare. The voice that said, "I'm here. Nothing's coming through me to get to you. Somebody following you. I don't know. Maybe? I thought I was being paranoid." "You don't look paranoid. You look scared to death." The headlights closed the gap. Now there were only 2 cars between them. "Jacob," her voice cracked. "Don't stop at the light. If it's red, don't stop. That's how people get killed at intersections. That's how I get killed if I stop," she said. And something in the way she said it, so plain, so certain, sent ice straight down his spine. The light ahead turned yellow. He had maybe 2 seconds to decide. 43 years of being a careful man, a rule-following man, a man who used his blinker in empty parking lots, because that's just who he was, and a woman beside him with her whole body shaking. He hit the gas. The Ford shot through the intersection as the light went red. Behind them, tires screamed. The car that had been following jerked to a stop, blocked by cross-traffic horns blaring in the rain. Hannah spun around in her seat. They stopped. They're stuck. "Go, go!" Jacob went. He took the next 2 turns fast, killed his headlights on a dark residential street, the way he'd seen people do in movies, and prayed a kid wasn't crossing, then pulled into the empty lot behind a shuttered hardware store and cut the engine. For a long moment, the only sound was the rain hammering the roof and both of them breathing. "Okay," Jacob said, gripping the wheel with both hands to stop them from shaking. "Okay, you're going to tell me what the hell is happening, right now." She didn't answer right away. She was crying silently, the worst kind, the kind where the tears just fall, and the person doesn't even bother to wipe them, because they've been holding it too long to care anymore. "You'll think I'm crazy," she said. "I just ran a red light and killed my headlights on a residential street," Jacob said. "I'm real open-minded right now." A broken sound came out of her that was half laugh, half sob. "6 weeks ago I found something," she said. "At work. I wasn't looking for it. I swear to God I wasn't looking for it. I was reconciling vendor invoices for the 4th quarter, and the numbers were wrong." "Wrong? How?" "We have the company has a disaster relief division. When there are floods, wildfires, hurricanes, we manage the logistics. Getting supplies and money where they need to go. It's the thing the company brags about. It's in every commercial." Her voice was gaining speed now, the words coming faster like a dam giving way. "There were payments going out to contractors, emergency contractors, millions of dollars. And I started matching them to the work orders because that's my job. That's literally the only thing I do all day, and half of them didn't exist." "Didn't exist how?" "The contractors. They aren't real. They're companies that were registered 3 days before they got paid and dissolved a week after. No employees, no trucks, no address except a mailbox in Delaware. The money goes in and then it moves. 4, 5 times. And then it's gone." She wiped her face finally angrily. "They're stealing it, Jacob. They're stealing money that's supposed to go to people who lost their homes in floods. And they're doing it through fake companies, so it looks like relief spending." Jacob sat very still. "How much?" "I found 4 million before I stopped counting. I think it's a lot more. I think it's been going on for years." "Okay." He breathed out. "Okay. That's a crime. A big one. So you go to the FBI, the police. You don't run red lights. You go to somebody with a badge." "I can't." Why not? And that was when she turned and looked at him full in the face, in the dark rainlight sliding down the windshield and across her cheeks, and said the thing that changed everything. Because every single document, she said, every approval, every signature, every authorization on those fake contracts has your name on it. The world went quiet in Jacob's ears. The rain, the ticking of the cooling engine, his own heartbeat, all of it dropped away. What did you say? Your name, Jacob. Your employee ID. Your login credentials. Your electronic signature is on the approval chain for almost every fraudulent payment I found. She was watching his face the way you watch a bridge you're not sure will hold your weight. That's why I couldn't go to anyone. Because the second I reported, they pull the file, and the file says Jacob Miller did it. Warehouse logistics manager, access to the vendor system, recently widowed, financially stressed, motive and opportunity, all wrapped in a bow. I never signed anything like that. His voice came out strangled. I move freight. I don't approve contracts. I don't. I've never even seen a relief contract in my life. That's 3 departments up from me. I know. Then how? Because someone used your credentials. She said it slowly, gently, the way you tell someone terrible news. Somebody with access to the system built a paper trail that leads to you. You've got no idea it exists. And the day this comes apart, and it will come apart, these things always come apart, you're the one who goes to prison. Not them. You. Jacob put both hands over his face and pressed hard as if he could push the words back out of his head. Emma, he said into his palms. What? He dropped his hands. His eyes were wild now. If I go to prison, if I'm even arrested, my mother-in-law files for custody the same afternoon. She's been waiting 3 years for a reason. A single father charged with stealing from flood victims. His voice broke on the word. She'd win. She'd win in a week. I'd lose my daughter. Do you understand what you're telling me? I'd lose Emma. Hannah didn't say anything. She didn't have to. Her silence was the confirmation, and something happened to Jacob Miller then, sitting in a dark parking lot behind a hardware store with a woman he'd met 3 hours ago. Something shifted deep and permanent, like a bone that had been broken, and was now setting into a different shape. For 3 years, he had been a man who survived, who put his head down, who took the extra shift, who ate the insult from the mother-in-law, who apologized when other people bumped into him, who made himself small and quiet and safe, because small, quiet, safe men don't lose the one thing they have left. He was done surviving. Tell me their names, he said. What? You said they. You know who's doing this. Tell me their names. Jacob, no. You don't understand what you're... I understand that a group of people I've never met decided I was a good enough nobody to hang a federal crime on. They looked at me, widower, dead wife, little girl, no lawyer, no money, no voice. And they thought him. Perfect. Nobody'll believe him, and nobody'll fight for him. His jaw was tight. They picked me because they thought I'd roll over. So tell me their names. Hannah stared at him. Whatever she'd expected from Jacob Miller when she got in his car. Pity panic, a man who'd drop her at the curb and drive away as fast as he could. This wasn't it. There are 3 of them that I'm sure of, she said finally. Roger Denton, VP of Operations. He signs off on the whole relief division. I've met Denton. Shook his hand at a Christmas party. He complimented my tie. The second is Karen Vale. She's in legal. She structures the shell companies. She's the one who makes it look clean. And the third... Hannah hesitated. The third is the one I can't prove. But I'd bet my life it's him because nothing moves in that building without him. Marcus Hale, Chief Financial Officer. Jacob knew that name. Everybody knew that name. Marcus Hale's face was on the wall in the lobby. Marcus Hale gave the speech at the retirement dinners. Marcus Hale had personally handed Jacob a plaque 2 years ago, 10 years of dedicated service, and Jacob had gone home and put it on the mantel next to a picture of his dead wife, because he'd been proud of it. He gave me a plaque, Jacob said. What? Nothing. He shook his head slowly. Nothing. Go on. You said you have proof. You said you copied something. Part of it? She reached into her purse, that purse she'd been clutching like a shield all night, and pulled out a small USB drive, holding it in her open palm like it was made of glass. This has the invoice reconciliation, the vendor registrations, the payment flows. Enough to show a pattern, enough to make an investigator start asking questions. Then that's what we do. We give it to an investigator. It's not enough, Jacob. She closed her fingers around the drive. It shows the fraud. It doesn't show who. Everything digital points at you, remember. I can prove money got stolen. I can't prove Hale stole it. And the second I try, they'll know it was me, and I'll be fired and discredited before I finish the sentence. A disgruntled accountant with 6 weeks on the job accusing the CFO, they'll bury me. They'll bury both of us. Jacob was quiet, thinking. When he spoke again, his voice had gone flat and hard, and Hannah realized this was the voice under the gentle one, the one that had gotten him through 3 years of loss without breaking. Then we don't hand them a case, he said. We build one so heavy they can't lift it off us. We get the thing that connects Hale to the fake companies. The one thing they think is safe because nobody would ever look for it. And what's that? I don't know yet. He started the engine. The dashboard lights came up, throwing his face in dim green. But I know how big companies work. I've watched them for 25 years from the bottom, and I'll tell you what men like Marcus Hale always do. They're careful with everything except the one place they feel safe. Everybody's got a safe place where they get sloppy. We find his. Hannah looked at him, this quiet, careful warehouse manager who 20 minutes ago had been talking about hair ties, now planning to take down a CFO, and asked the question that had been sitting in her chest all night. Why are you helping me? You could drop me off. Report me. Save yourself. You don't know me at all. Jacob pulled out of the lot, headlights back on, wipers going rain-streaking silver across the glass. Because somebody decided I was a nobody, he said. A quiet nobody who'd take it lying down. And the thing is, he checked his mirrors, careful, always careful. They were half right. I am quiet. And the other half. His hands were steady on the wheel now, steadier than they'd been all night. The other half, he said, they're about to find out about. He drove her home the long way, watching every mirror, taking 3 wrong turns to make sure nobody was behind them. When he finally pulled up outside her building on Argonne, she didn't get out right away. They'll come after Emma, Hannah said quietly. If they realize we're onto them. People like this, when they feel cornered, they don't get careful, they get cruel. They'll go for the thing you love. I need you to understand that before you say yes to any of this. Jacob stared through the windshield at the rain-blurred street. When my wife was dying, he said, she made me promise something. She was so weak by then she could barely talk, but she grabbed my hand and she made me promise. You know what she made me promise? Hannah shook her head. I thought she was going to say, take care of Emma. Keep her safe. Normal thing a dying mother says. He swallowed. Instead, she said, don't let being scared for her turn you into a small man. She needs a father, not a bodyguard. He laughed, but it didn't reach his eyes. I never understood what she meant. For 3 years I didn't understand it. I thought keeping Emma safe meant keeping my head down, not making waves, not being a target. He turned to Hannah. I understand it now. Jacob, they came into my life, Hannah. I didn't go looking for this. They put my name on their crime, and they never even bothered to learn who I was. That was their mistake. His voice dropped. You don't teach a quiet man that he has nothing left to lose, because a quiet man with nothing left to lose is the most dangerous thing there is. She held the USB drive out to him across the dark space of the car. Keep it, she said. You have Emma. You have a reason to fight harder than I do. Just please, hide it somewhere they'd never look. Jacob took it. It was so small in his palm, 4 grams of plastic and metal that could send him to prison or set him free, and he didn't know yet which. I know exactly where to hide it, he said. Where? He thought of a pink hair tie looped around his gear shift, of a 10-year-old spy who stayed up reading with a flashlight, of the one place in the world that was truly his, that no VP or CFO or lawyer in a shell company scheme would ever think to search. Somewhere, he said, that only a father would know to look. Hannah got out of the car. She paused with her hand on the door, rain darkening her hair, and looked back in at him one last time. You could still walk away, she said. This is the last exit, Jacob. Once you start pulling this thread, there's no untangling it. You go home right now, delete tonight from your memory, and maybe it never touches you. I'll disappear. I'll quit. You'll never see me again. Jacob looked at the little drive in his hand, then up at her. My daughter asked me something last week, he said. She asked why the good guys in her books always win, even when they're losing the whole time. You know what I told her? What? I said the good guys win because they don't quit when it's smart to quit. That's the whole difference. Anybody can be brave when they're winning. He closed his fingers around the drive. I've been telling my little girl to be brave for 3 years. I'd be a hell of a liar to fold the first time it's my turn. Hannah's chin trembled. For 6 weeks, she'd carried this thing alone, a woman new in town with no one watching her own name burn down slowly beside a crime she never committed. And for the first time, the very first time, she wasn't carrying it by herself. Thank you, she whispered. Don't thank me yet, Jacob said. We haven't done anything yet. Go inside. Lock your door. Don't open it for anybody, and I mean anybody, not a delivery, not a cop, nobody until I call you. You hear me? She nodded. She shut the door. He watched her go up the steps, watched her let herself in, watched the light come on in a second-floor window. He didn't pull away until he saw the curtain move and her shadow behind it safe. Then, Jacob Miller drove home through the rain to the small house where his daughter was asleep with a flashlight, and he did not feel afraid. For the first time in 3 years, he felt awake. Emma was asleep on the couch when he got in a book fallen open across her chest, the flashlight still glowing weakly in her hand, where she'd drifted off mid-page. The babysitter had texted twice. He paid her, thanked her, locked the door behind her, and then just stood there, in the dark of his own living room, looking at his sleeping daughter. She had her mother's nose. She had her mother's stubborn chin. She had her mother's way of falling asleep in the middle of something important, like she trusted the world to hold still and keep her place for her. Jacob knelt down beside the couch and gently took the book from her chest, marking her page with the pink hair tie from his pocket. She stirred, but didn't wake. Daddy, she mumbled. I'm here, Bug. Go back to sleep. You smell like rain. It's raining. Did you have fun at your work thing? Jacob looked at his daughter's sleepy face, and he thought about everything sitting in his coat pocket right now, the drive, the names, the future he'd just chosen for both of them. It was an interesting night, he said quietly. Boring. No bug. He smoothed her hair back. Not boring at all. She was already drifting again. Carry me. He lifted her. She was getting so big now, all elbows and long legs, not the tiny thing he used to carry so easily, and she looped her arms around his neck and pressed her face into his shoulder, and he stood there in the middle of the living room holding the entire reason he was about to burn his safe, quiet life to the ground. I've got you, Jacob whispered into her hair. You hear me? Whatever happens, whatever they try, I've got you. I will always have you. He carried her up the stairs to bed, tucked the blankets around her the way he had 10,000 times, and set the flashlight on her nightstand where she could reach it. Then he went back downstairs, took the USB drive out of his coat, and stood for a long time trying to decide where in this small house a man could hide the truth so completely that the people trying to destroy him would never ever find it. He looked at Emma's backpack by the door, at the coffee filters, at his own work boots by the mat. And Jacob Miller, warehouse logistics manager, widower, single father, the quiet nobody they'd chosen. Precisely because they thought he'd never fight back, began for the first time in his careful, rule-following, head-down life to plan. Outside, the rain kept falling on Spokane, and somewhere across town in a glass office 30 floors above the street, a man who had handed Jacob a plaque 2 years ago had no idea that the nobody he'd chosen had just woken all the way up. The plan he made that first night was simple, and like most simple plans, it nearly got him killed by Monday morning. Jacob walked into the warehouse the same way he always did, hard hat under his arm, coffee in his hand, nodding at the guys on the loading dock. He clocked in at 6:58, 2 minutes early, the way he had for 11 years. Nobody looking at him would have seen anything different. That was the whole point. Inside, though, his mind was moving faster than it had moved in years, cataloging every camera, every keypad, every door that needed a badge. His plan had 3 parts. Find out how they got his login, find out where Hale got sloppy, and do both without a single soul noticing that quiet Jacob Miller had started to look up instead of down. It lasted about 4 hours. At 11, his phone buzzed with a text from a number he didn't know. He almost ignored it. Then he read it, and the coffee went cold in his hand. You gave a woman a ride Friday night. Bad weather to be driving around lost. Hope you both got home safe. That was all. No name. No threat. Not really. Just enough to tell him that somebody had watched them Friday, that the car in the rain hadn't been paranoia, and that whoever sent it wanted Jacob to know he'd been seen. He stood between 2 pallets of canned goods and read it 6 times. His first instinct, the instinct of 3 years of keeping his head down, was to write back something apologetic. Just gave a coworker a ride storm was bad, no harm meant. Make himself small. Make himself safe. He deleted the draft before he sent it. Then he deleted the whole thing, screenshotted it first, and put his phone in his pocket. They want me scared, he said to himself low. Fine. Scared's not the same as stupid. He called Hannah on his lunch break, standing out in the yard, where no cameras reached and the diesel engines were loud enough to swallow a voice. They know, he said the second she picked up. About Friday. I just got a text. Somebody saw us. There was a silence on the line so long he thought the call had dropped. Hannah. I heard you. Her voice was thin. What did it say? He told her. He heard her breathing change, get quick and shallow, and he knew that sound because he'd heard it come out of Emma during a nightmare. Okay, listen to me, Jacob said. Don't fall apart. That's what the text is for. It's a scare. They don't send a text if they already have what they want. They send a text when they're not sure yet. Not sure of what? Whether you told anybody, whether there's a copy, whether it went anywhere. He watched a forklift back up across the yard. Right now, to them, we're a loose thread they think they can still pull out clean. The day we stop being that, the texts stop and something worse starts. So we've got a window, a small one, and I'm not spending it wetting my pants over a phone message. Jacob, her voice cracked. How are you so calm? He almost laughed. I'm not calm. I'm just done being the other thing. That afternoon, he did the first thing on his list, and it turned out to be the easiest and the most sickening. He went to the small break room where the shift schedules were posted, and he pulled up his own login history on the shared terminal, the one every warehouse manager could access to check freight manifests. And there it was. His employee ID active approving vendor payments on 11 different dates over the past 14 months. Every single one of those dates he'd been somewhere else. He knew it in his gut before he even checked, but he checked anyway, because a man building a case needs more than his gut. March 9th. He'd been in Seattle that day for his mother-in-law's birthday, a miserable lunch he'd never forget. His ID had approved a $110,000 payment to a company called Cascade Emergency Logistics at 2:14 in the afternoon from a terminal inside this very building, while Jacob himself was 300 miles away, getting told by Diane that he was raising Emma wrong. He could prove he wasn't here. He had the credit card receipt. He had the birthday. He had a whole miserable afternoon of witnesses. And that was the moment the fear turned into something hotter and better in his chest, because for the first time, he understood that they had made a mistake. They'd been so sure nobody would look that they hadn't bothered to be careful about the dates. They'd used his name on days he could prove he was gone. They got greedy, he whispered to the screen. They got lazy and greedy. He didn't print anything. Printing left a record. He wrote the dates down on the back of a receipt in his own pocket and walked out of the break room like a man who'd just checked a freight schedule. By Tuesday, the second problem announced itself, and it came wearing a friendly face. Ray Coleman had worked the docks with Jacob for 9 years. Ray was the guy who covered your shift when your kid was sick, who remembered your dead wife's name and said it out loud once a year on the anniversary, so you'd know somebody else remembered too. Jacob loved Ray the way you love the people who show up. So when Ray sidled over during the morning break and said real quiet, "Hey, can we talk in the yard a sec?" Jacob followed him without a second thought. "What's going on with you and the new girl in accounting?" Ray asked. Jacob's stomach dropped, but his face didn't move. 11 years of keeping his face still had made him good at it. "Hannah. I gave her a ride home Friday. Her rideshare fell through." "Why?" Ray looked at him a long moment. Ray had kind eyes, always had, and right now, those kind eyes were worried sick. "Because a guy came and asked me about it yesterday," Ray said. "Suit, not from our building. Said he was doing a routine security review. Asked if you'd been acting different. Asked if you'd been in the vendor system lately. Asked if I'd seen you talking to Hannah Brooks." "What did you tell him?" "I told him you gave a girl a ride in the rain because that's the kind of guy you are, and I told him to go find somebody else to babysit." Ray's jaw tightened. "But Jacob, when a suit from 30 floors up drives down to the warehouse to ask a forklift driver about you by name, that's not routine. That's a man being lined up for something. I've seen it before. 9 years ago, they did it to a guy named Petey in shipping before they walked him out and pinned an inventory shortfall on him. He didn't do it either." Ray put a hand on Jacob's shoulder. "Whatever this is, drop it. Whatever you saw, unsee it. You've got Emma. You cannot afford to be Petey. Please." And there it was. The temptation laid out warm and reasonable by a man who loved him. Drop it. Unsee it. Keep your head down. Keep Emma. Nobody would blame him. His own wife had once told him not to be a small man, but she'd never had a suit from the 30th floor asking questions about her by name. Jacob looked at his friend, and for a second, one long second, he almost said yes. Then he thought of March 9th, of his name on a payment he never made, of the fact that unseeing it wouldn't unmake the file, wouldn't unwrite his ID onto a federal crime, wouldn't do one single thing except leave him standing there when the trap finally sprung. "Ray," he said, "if I drop it, does the file with my name on it go away?" Ray's face changed. "What file?" "That's what I thought." Jacob squeezed his friend's shoulder back. "Listen to me. If anybody else asks you about me, you tell them the truth. I gave a girl a ride. That's all you know. Don't lie for me, don't cover for me, don't put yourself in it. You've got your own kids. But don't ask me to unsee it, Ray. It's already too late for that. It was too late Friday night." Ray stared at him with something new in his eyes. Something like fear, but also underneath it, something like respect. "You're really gonna do this," he said. "Whatever it is." "I'm really gonna do this." "Then God help you." Ray shook his head slowly. "And God help them, maybe. I've never seen you like this. 20 years I've known you and I've never once seen you look like this." "Like what?" Ray thought about it. "Like a man who's finally got nothing to be afraid of." That was Tuesday. Tuesday night, the third thing happened, and it was the worst one yet because it came into his own house. He'd worked late catching up on the real work, so nobody could say his numbers had slipped. He got home at 7, and the babysitter met him at the door with a face that made his heart stop. "Everything's fine," she said quickly, seeing his face. "Emma's fine. She's upstairs. But Mr. Miller, a man came by, around 5. Said he was from your work. Said he had paperwork you'd forgotten and needed a signature. I told him you weren't home, and he should come to the office, and he was nice about it. He left." "But—" She hesitated. "He kept looking past me, into the house. And when I closed the door, I watched from the window, and he didn't go to a car. He walked around the side, toward the back, and then a minute later he was gone. Jacob was already moving past her up the stairs into Emma's room, where his daughter was lying on her stomach, reading a book about a girl who solved mysteries. "Hey, Bug." "Hi, Daddy." She didn't look up. "Did you know that if you leave a light on all night, a moth will die trying to get to it? It thinks the light is the moon." "I did not know that." He sat on the edge of her bed and made himself breathe. "You have a good day at school." It was fine. A man came to the house. Jacob's whole body went cold. "The sitter told me. Did you talk to him?" "No, I was upstairs, but I looked out the window." Emma turned a page. "He was looking at our house funny. Like the way you look at a car you're thinking about buying. Up and down, counting the windows." She finally looked up at him. "Is he going to buy our house?" 10 years old, a spy in training. She'd seen more from a second-floor window than the grown babysitter had seen from the doorstep, and she'd described it perfectly. Counting the windows. The man had been casing the house. "No bug," Jacob said, and he kept his voice easy, even though his heart was slamming. "Nobody's buying our house. Some work stuff got mixed up, that's all. I'll straighten it out." "Okay." She went back to her book, then added casually, "I locked my window anyway, and I put my desk chair under the doorknob, like they do in movies, just in case." Jacob looked at his daughter for a long moment, this small, brave person who'd calmly barricaded her own bedroom door because a stranger had looked at their house wrong, and he felt two things at war in his chest. Pride, sharp and fierce. And a fear so total it nearly took his legs out from under him. He kissed the top of her head. "You're a smart kid, you know that." "I know," Emma said. He went downstairs, paid the sitter, added $40, and asked her as calmly as he could manage to never let anyone into the house again, for any reason, work or otherwise, and to call him the second anyone came to the door. Then he locked every window himself, checked the back door twice, and stood in his own kitchen, shaking with a rage he didn't recognize. They'd come to his house. They'd sent a man to look at the windows while his 10-year-old was inside. He called Hannah. "They were at my house," he said, and his voice was not calm anymore. "A man came to my door with a fake reason. He cased the place. My daughter watched him count our windows, Hannah. She's 10 years old, and she barricaded her own bedroom door tonight." He heard Hannah make a small sound like she'd been hit. "That's why," she said. "That's why what?" "That's why I couldn't tell anyone for 6 weeks." Her voice was hollow. "Because the day you tell someone, they stop being careful and start being cruel. I told you, I warned you. They go for the thing you love." She was crying now. "Jacob, I'm so sorry. I never should have gotten in your car. I looked at you at that fundraiser and I thought, there's a decent man, a safe man, a man who'll help me, and I never thought about what I was pulling you into. I saw a lifeboat, and I didn't think about the fact that I was going to sink it. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." And here was the moment. She was giving him the door. She was practically begging him to be angry, to blame her, to hang up and quit, and take his daughter and run for the hills. Every reasonable part of him wanted to. "Stop," Jacob said. "Stop apologizing. You didn't do this to me. They did. You didn't put my name on those payments, Hannah. They did that on their own over a year ago before you'd ever heard of me. You didn't drag me into anything. I was already in it. You're the only reason I found out before it was too late." He gripped the edge of the counter. "You didn't sink my boat. You threw me a rope in the dark, and you told me there was a hole I couldn't see. That's the opposite of sinking me." There was a long silence. "I've never had anybody in my corner," Hannah said finally, so quietly he almost didn't hear it. "My whole life. I've always been the quiet one at the end of the table, the one people forget to introduce. When my dad—" She stopped. "When your dad, what?" Another silence. Then, in a rush, like it hurt to say, "My dad lost everything in the 2009 floods in Iowa." Everything. The house, the shop, all of it gone in one night. And the relief that was supposed to come, the emergency money, the federal aid, it never came. It got tied up. It got lost. It got eaten by contractors and paperwork and men in offices, and by the time anything reached the little town he lived in, he'd already had the heart attack. He died, waiting for help that somebody upstream had already stolen. Her voice broke completely. So when I saw those invoices, Jacob, when I saw those fake companies eating relief money, I wasn't just looking at a crime. I was looking at the exact machine that killed my father. I couldn't unsee it. I couldn't. Jacob closed his eyes. Everything about her made sense now. The fear. The 6 weeks of silence. The purse held like a shield. The way she'd gotten in the car of a stranger because he looked decent and she'd run out of other options. That's why you can't let this go either, he said softly. It's not about your job. It was never about my job. Okay. He opened his eyes. Then we're the same kind of stubborn. Good. We're gonna need it. He looked out his kitchen window at the dark backyard where a stranger had walked 3 hours ago. Because now they know I'm not scaring off. And that means it's about to get faster. He was right about that. Everything got faster after Tuesday. Wednesday morning, Jacob did the boldest thing he'd done in his life, and he did it at 6:40 a.m., 20 minutes before his shift, when the building was still half empty. He walked badge swinging into a part of the building he had no business being in. The vendor records archive. It was a windowless room on the second floor, where the old paper files were kept, the ones from before everything went digital, and Jacob had figured out something in the small hours of the night that had made him sit straight up in bed. The digital records all pointed at him. But the fake companies had been paid for over a year. And more than a year ago, before a systems upgrade, Jacob remembered because it had shut the warehouse down for 2 days, the vendor approvals had generated a paper copy. An automatic printout. Filed and forgotten. If those paper copies existed, they'd have real signatures on them. Or they'd have his forged one. Either way, they'd have something the digital record couldn't fake because paper doesn't rewrite itself in the night. His badge worked on the archive door. He'd half expected it not to. He slipped inside, heart pounding, and started going through the filing cabinets by the dates on his receipt. March 9th. He found the drawer. He found the folder. His hands were shaking so hard he could barely hold the pages. And there it was. The paper approval for the payment to Cascade Emergency Logistics. His employee ID. His name printed. And at the bottom, a signature line. The signature wasn't his. It wasn't even close to his. It was a scrawl fast and careless, the signature of somebody who'd never bothered to learn what Jacob Miller's actual signature looked like because they'd never expected anyone to pull the paper copy. But that wasn't what made Jacob's blood run cold. What made his blood run cold was the small handwritten note in the corner of the page, an initialed note. The way managers note things on paper, a private shorthand between people who never thought a warehouse manager would be standing in this room at 6:40 in the morning. 3 letters. Initials. M.H. Marcus Hale. In his own hand. On a document approving a payment to a company that didn't exist filed under Jacob's stolen name. Jacob stood in that windowless room holding the single piece of paper that connected the CFO of the company to the crime, and for a moment, he couldn't breathe. This was it. This was the one thing Hannah said didn't exist. The thing that connected Hale to the fake companies. It had been sitting in a filing cabinet the whole time because they'd been so confident in the digital cover that they'd forgotten paper remembers. He didn't take the folder. Taking the folder would be theft, would be noticed, would tell them exactly what he'd found. Instead, he did what any father of a spy in training would do. He took out his phone and with hands he forced to be steady, he photographed every page. March 9th. Then he went back to his receipt and found the other dates, and he photographed those too, and by the time he was done, he had 11 documents, 11 fake payments, and on 4 of them, the initials M.H. in the corner in the same careless hand. He put the folders back exactly as he'd found them. He wiped the drawer handle with his sleeve, feeling foolish and terrified and alive. And he walked out of that archive at 6:58, badging out 2 minutes before his shift, the way he'd done for 11 years. He was on the loading dock by 7:05, and no one, Not one single person knew that quiet Jacob Miller had just found the thread that could unravel all of them. He texted Hannah 4 words from the yard at his morning break. "I found the paper." Her reply came in seconds. "What paper?" "The one you said didn't exist." Hale's initials. In his hand, on 4 of them. Paper copies from before the upgrade. They forgot paper remembers. The 3 dots disappeared, appeared again. Then, "Oh my God, Jacob, oh my God. Do you understand what that is?" "I understand it's the first thing they can't rewrite. We can go to the FBI now. We can actually go now." And that was when Jacob made the decision that Hannah would question, that he'd question himself, that turned out to be either the smartest or the most dangerous thing he did in the whole business. "Not yet," he typed. "What do you mean, not yet, Jacob? That's the whole case. That's the thing we needed. It's the thing that hangs Hale. It's not the thing that clears me." He stood in the roar of the diesel engines and thought it through the way he'd think through a shipping problem, cold and clear. If we go now, they arrest Hale, maybe. But there's still 11 digital records with my name on them. Hale's lawyers will say I forged his initials to frame him and cover my own theft. It becomes his word against mine, and he's the CFO, and I'm the warehouse guy with the dead wife and the money troubles. We don't just need to hang him. We need it airtight. We need the money trail, the paper, and a way to prove I never had access to approve those payments in the first place. How do we prove that? Jacob watched the forklift back up across the yard, and an idea, terrible and perfect, began to form. The security footage, he typed slowly. Every one of those approvals came from a terminal in this building on a specific date and time. If I can prove I wasn't at that terminal, if I can prove someone else was, then the whole frame falls apart. And there's cameras on every terminal in this building. They'll have deleted it. The digital footage, sure, but this building's old Hannah. Half the security cameras still run to an old backup system in the basement. Tape. Actual tape. Because they never finished the upgrade, same as the paper files. He almost smiled. They forgot paper remembers. I'm betting they forgot the basement too. There was a long pause. Jacob, Hannah wrote, if you go into the basement security room, that's not archives. That's a badge you don't have, and a place you have no reason to be. If they catch you down there, it's over. That's not a coworker getting a ride in the rain. That's a man they can walk out in handcuffs the same day. She was right. He knew she was right. Going into the archives was one thing. He had a thin excuse if anyone asked. The basement security room was another animal entirely. There was no innocent reason for a logistics manager to be down there. If he got caught, they wouldn't need to frame him for anything. He'd hand them the arrest himself. He thought about Emma barricading her bedroom door. He thought about a stranger counting his windows. I know the risk, he typed. Give me 2 days to figure out how to get in clean, and Hannah, copy everything I sent you. The photos. Put it 3 places. Cloud Drive, email it to yourself under a different account. If something happens to me, that paper has to survive. Promise me. I promise. Jacob, please be careful. Please. I can't be the reason another good man dies waiting. You won't be, he wrote. I'm not your father, Hannah. Your father was waiting for help. I'm not waiting for anybody. That was Wednesday. For 2 days after that, nothing happened, and the nothing was worse than anything, because Jacob knew they were watching, and he knew they were planning, and he couldn't see any of it. He went to work. He came home. He hugged Emma. He checked the windows. He waited for his own move to be ready, and he watched over his shoulder the whole time. Then Friday came, 1 week to the day since the ride in the rain, and everything he'd been building nearly came apart in a single afternoon. It started at 2 o'clock when the loudspeaker in the warehouse crackled, and a voice Jacob didn't recognize said, Jacob Miller, please report to the 3rd floor conference room. Jacob Miller, to the 3rd floor. Every head on the dock turned to look at him. Ray was closest. Ray looked at him with those kind, terrified eyes and mouthed one word. Petey. Jacob set down his clipboard. His heart was going like a hammer, but his hands, when he took off his gloves, were steady. He'd promised himself something in the last week. Whatever came, they would not see him small. They would not see him afraid. They'd chosen him because they thought he'd fold, and he was going to walk into whatever this was standing straight up. "If I'm not back in an hour," he said quietly to Ray. "You never heard anything from me. You don't know anything, and you call this number." He scribbled Hannah's number on a scrap of cardboard. "You tell her they took me to the 3rd floor. That's all. Then you delete it. You understand." Ray took the cardboard. "Jacob." "You've got kids, Ray. Stay out of it. Just make the call if I don't come back." He walked to the 3rd floor. He'd never been to the 3rd floor in 11 years. The conference room had glass walls and a long table, and sitting at that table were 3 people. A woman from HR he half recognized. A lawyer type in an expensive suit he'd never seen. And at the head of the table, a woman with silver hair and a red blazer and the coldest smile Jacob had ever seen on a human face. "Mr. Miller," she said, "please sit. I'm Karen Vale, legal." Karen Vale. The second name Hannah had given him in the rain. The one who structured the shell companies who made it look clean. Sitting across a table from him now, smiling like a knife. Jacob sat. He said nothing. He'd learned a long time ago from a dying wife that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is make the other person talk first. "I'll get right to it," Vale said. "It's come to our attention that there may be some irregularities in the vendor payment system, discrepancies. And unfortunately, an internal review has flagged your credentials in connection with a number of these irregularities." She folded her hands. "Now, we want to give you every opportunity to explain. Before this becomes something bigger, something that involves law enforcement, something that frankly, given your personal situation, your daughter, your recent loss, none of us want to see happen to you." There it was. The threat wrapped in fake kindness. Your daughter. Your recent loss. They'd looked at his whole life and picked out the 2 softest places to press. Jacob looked at Karen Vale, and something his wife used to say came back to him. "Don't let being scared for her turn you into a small man." "Ms. Vale," he said, and his voice was calm and clear and did not shake even a little. "You said my credentials are flagged on some payments." "That's right." "Can you tell me the dates?" A flicker crossed her face. Just a flicker. "I'm sure I can pull them, but I don't see how that's—" "I'll save you the trouble." Jacob leaned forward. "One of them is March 9th of this year. I'll bet you money on it." "And on March 9th of this year, Ms. Vale, I was in Seattle, 300 miles from that terminal at my mother-in-law's birthday lunch, and I have the credit card receipt to prove it. Time-stamped, 2:11 p.m., about the same minute my credentials were apparently approving $110,000 to a company that has no employees and dissolved a month later." He watched her face very carefully. "Now, how do you suppose I was in 2 places at once?" The room went dead silent. The HR woman looked at Karen Vale, the lawyer looked at Karen Vale, and Karen Vale looked at Jacob Miller, and for 1/2 of 1 second the cold smile slipped, and Jacob saw what was underneath it, and what was underneath it was fear. They hadn't checked the dates, just like he'd guessed. They'd built the whole frame assuming nobody would ever be able to prove they weren't where their credentials said they were. And here was the warehouse nobody the man they'd chosen precisely because they thought he had no fight in him, calmly explaining that he had an alibi they hadn't accounted for. "I think," Karen Vale said, recovering but slower now, more careful, "that you should be very cautious about the accusations you're implying, Mr. Miller." "I'm not implying anything," Jacob said. "You called me up here. You told me my name's on payments I never made. I'm just telling you I can prove I never made them. That's not an accusation. That's an alibi." He stood up. "Is there anything else? Because I've got freight to move, and unless you're firing me or arresting me right now in this room with a reason you can put in writing, I'd like to get back to my job." Nobody said anything. Nobody could. Because they weren't ready to arrest him, not yet. Not with him suddenly talking about receipts and alibis and terminals, and firing him without cause would open a door they couldn't afford to open. "You can go," Karen Vale said finally. "For now." "For now," Jacob repeated. And he walked out of that glass room with his back straight, and he did not let them see his hands shake until he was in the stairwell alone, where he gripped the railing and breathed and thought, I did it. I stared her down, and I did it. But he'd made a mistake, and he wouldn't understand how big a mistake until later. He'd shown his hand. He'd told them he had a receipt and alibi that he knew the dates. He'd meant to rattle them, and he had, but rattled. People don't get careful. Rattled people get cruel. He'd just told the enemy that the quiet, nobody had teeth, and now they knew they couldn't wait. Now they knew they had to move first. He found out how fast they could move at 3:40 that same afternoon. His phone buzzed in the yard. Unknown number, the same as before. He opened it expecting another vague threat, another little scare. It was a photograph. It took him a second to understand what he was looking at, and when he did, the whole world tilted sideways and every drop of blood drained out of his face. It was a photo of the front of Emma's school, taken from across the street. And in the frame, small but unmistakable, wearing the purple backpack he'd bought her for Christmas, was his daughter walking out the front doors, with her class laughing at something, completely unaware that someone was standing across the street pointing a camera at her. Under the photo were 4 words. Such a happy kid. Jacob Miller stood in the roaring yard, with his daughter's face on his phone, and a stranger's threat beneath it. And for the first time all week, the calm broke completely. His knees went. He caught himself on a stack of pallets. And out of his chest came a sound he didn't recognize, low and animal, the sound of a father who has just been shown exactly how far the people hunting him are willing to go. They knew he had teeth now, so they'd reached past him. Past the alibi, past the receipts, past the paper in the archive, and the tape in the basement, past everything he'd built. They'd reached for Emma, and Jacob understood, standing there with his heart in pieces and his hands shaking around the phone, that the window Hannah had warned him about, the small one, the one where they were still being careful, had just slammed shut. Whatever came next wasn't going to be texts and glass conference rooms and cold, polite smiles. It was going to be war. And they'd just told him exactly where they intended to hit him first. He didn't finish his shift. He didn't tell anyone. He put the phone in his pocket, walked off the dock, got in his Ford, and drove to Emma's school so fast he ran 2 lights he never in his life would have run a week ago. She was fine. That was the first thing, the only thing that mattered for the first 10 seconds. She was standing in the pickup line with her teacher purple backpack, laughing at something a friend said, alive and whole and 10 years old. Jacob got out of the car and walked to her too fast, and she saw his face and stopped laughing. Daddy, why are you here? It's not even 3 yet. Change of plans bug. He crouched down to her level and made his voice light, even though his heart was breaking. You get a special afternoon with your old man. Come on. Is something wrong? 10 years old, and she read him like a book, just like her mother. Nothing's wrong, I just missed you. He took her backpack, took her hand, walked her to the car with his body between her and the street, scanning every parked vehicle, every window, every stranger. He didn't see anyone. That was almost worse. Whoever took that photo was good enough that Jacob couldn't spot him even when he was looking. He got Emma buckled in and pulled out, checking his mirrors the way he'd been checking them all week, and Emma watched him do it. You keep looking behind us, she said. Just traffic bug. You're a bad liar, Daddy. You've always been a bad liar. Mom used to say it too. She looked out the window. You did it at Mom's funeral. You kept telling everybody you were okay and you weren't. I could tell then, and I can tell now. Jacob's throat closed up. He kept his eyes on the road. You're right, he said finally. Because she deserved that. Because his wife had told him with her last breath that Emma needed a father, not a bodyguard, and a bodyguard lies, and a father tells the truth in the size a kid can hold. Something is wrong. Not with you, not with us, but there's a problem at work, a serious one, and it's got me scared, and I'm handling it. I need you to be a little extra careful for a while. Stay with your class. Don't go anywhere with anybody, even if they say they know me. Even if they say, I sent them. If it's not me or Grandma or your teacher, you don't go. Can you do that? And Emma was quiet for a moment. Is it the man who counted our windows? Maybe. I don't know. Maybe. She nodded slowly, taking it in with a seriousness that broke his heart clean in half. Okay, I can do that. I'm good at noticing things. I know you are, Bug. His voice cracked. You're the best noticer I know. He took her home the long way, watching for anyone behind them, and by the time he pulled into the driveway, he'd made 3 decisions. The first was that Emma was not sleeping in that house tonight. The second was that he needed help, real help more than a USB drive and photos on his phone. And the third, the one that scared him most, was that the window Hannah had warned him about was gone, and the only way out now was straight through. He called Diane, his mother-in-law, the woman who'd spent 3 years telling him he was raising Emma wrong, who wanted custody, who was the last person on earth Jacob wanted to owe a favor. She picked up on the second ring. Jacob, what's wrong? You never call. Diane, I need you to take Emma for a few days. Silence. Then sharp. Why? He'd thought about how to say this the whole drive home. The truth would send her straight to a custody lawyer. A lie would leave Emma unprotected. So he found the narrow road between them. There's a situation at my work, a legal thing. Somebody's trying to pin something on me that I didn't do, and they're playing dirty, and today they... His voice caught, and he hated that it caught in front of Diane, but he pushed through it. Today, they sent me a photograph of Emma, at her school, to scare me. And I will not have her in the middle of this. She needs to be somewhere they don't know to look, and that's you, Diane. That's your house. Nobody would think to look at yours. The silence on the other end stretched so long he thought she'd hung up. Somebody photographed my granddaughter, Diane said, and her voice had gone very low and very cold, and it was the first time in 3 years Jacob had heard her sound like they were on the same side of anything. Yes. To threaten you. Yes. Bring her to me. Tonight. A pause. And Jacob, whatever you think of me, whatever I've said to you, you listen now. My daughter married you because she saw something in you, and I never could see it, and I told myself she was wrong. But a man who calls his mother-in-law and hands over the thing he loves most to keep her safe, even knowing I might use it against him. She stopped. When she came back, her voice was rough. Maybe I was the one who couldn't see. You bring her to me. She'll be safe. And you go do what you have to do. Jacob sat in his driveway, and for the first time in 3 years, cried in front of the phone with Diane on the other end, and neither of them said anything about it. He packed Emma a bag. She watched him do it sitting on her bed, hugging her knees. How long am I staying at Grandma's? A few days, maybe a week. Because of the work problem. Because of the work problem. She was quiet. Then she said, Daddy, are you going to be okay? And Jacob stopped packing, and he sat down on the bed next to his daughter, and he took her small hand in his 2 big ones, and he told her the truest thing he knew. I don't know, Bug. I'm not going to lie to you. I don't know how this ends. But I know that some men made a very bad mistake. They looked at me, and they thought I was a nobody they could push around because I lost your mom, and I keep my head down and I don't make trouble. They thought I'd just let them do whatever they wanted. He squeezed her hand. And they were wrong. Because they forgot the one thing about me that matters more than anything else in the world. What? You. He looked her in the eye. They forgot that I've got you, and a man with a kid like you doesn't lie down for anybody. Not ever. So whatever happens, you remember that. Whatever they say about me, whatever ends up in the news, whatever anybody tells you, your daddy did not lie down. Your daddy stood up. For you. You hold on to that, no matter what. Emma threw her arms around his neck and held on so tight it hurt, and Jacob held her back just as tight, and for a long moment, neither of them let go. He dropped her at Diane's at 7:15 that night. Diane met them at the door, and she did something she'd never done in 11 years. She put her hand on Jacob's arm. Go, she said. She's safe. Go do what you have to do. And Jacob, come back. Do you hear me? Whatever this is, You come back to her." He drove away from Diane's house, lighter and heavier at the same time. Lighter because Emma was safe. Heavier because now there was nothing between him and the thing coming, no reason left, to be careful, no soft place they could reach. He called Hannah from the road. "They sent me a photo of Emma," he said, "at her school to scare me off. So I moved her. She's somewhere safe now, somewhere they don't know." "Oh my God." Hannah's voice shook. "Jacob, I'm so—" "Don't say sorry. We're past sorry." His voice had changed again, gone hard and fast. "They just made the biggest mistake they could have made. They took the one thing I was protecting off the table. You warned me they'd go for what I love. Well, they went for it, and now she's gone, and there's nothing left for them to threaten me with. Do you understand what that means?" "What?" "It means I've got nothing left to lose but the thing I already decided to risk. And they've got everything to lose. That's not their fight to win anymore, Hannah. That's mine." He gripped the wheel. "How's the copies? Did you put the photos in 3 places like I said? Cloud Drive, and I emailed them to a burner account. And I did one more thing." She hesitated. "I got a lawyer. A real one, not one of ours. A woman named Patricia Reyes. She does whistleblower cases, corporate fraud. She's the real deal. I told her everything. She wants to meet us both. Tomorrow. She says with the paper you found with Hale's initials with your alibi, she says we might actually have something. Something we could take to the U.S. attorney directly and skip the company entirely." Jacob felt something loosen in his chest. A lawyer. A real one. Someone in his corner who knew the rules of a game he was playing blind. "Where? When?" "Her office, 10 a.m. But Jacob, she said something else. She said the moment we file anything, the moment this becomes official, they'll know it came from us and there's no more hiding. She said the 2 most dangerous days in a fraud case are the day before you file and the day after, because before they're trying to scare you off. And after—" Hannah's voice dropped. "After scaring you off doesn't work anymore. After the only thing that helps them is if you can't testify." Jacob understood exactly what she meant, and he didn't flinch. "Then we make sure we can both testify," he said. "Tomorrow, 10 a.m. I'll be there." That night, he didn't sleep. He sat in his empty house, Emma's flashlight still on her nightstand upstairs, and he laid out everything he had. The photos of the archived documents. The receipt from March 9th. Hannah's USB drive. The threatening texts screenshotted. The photo of Emma, which made his hands shake every time he looked at it. He organized it all, ordered it made copies, and by 3 in the morning, he had a case sitting on his kitchen table, and he sat there guarding it like a man guards a fire in the wilderness. At 4 a.m., his phone lit up. A text. Unknown number. His whole body went cold before he even read it. "Empty house. Where's your little girl tonight, Jacob?" He was on his feet before he finished reading it, heart slamming because it meant they were watching the house right now in the dark, and they'd noticed Emma was gone. He killed the kitchen light. He moved to the window, staying to the side, and looked out at the street. There was a car parked across from his house. Dark. Engine off. And as he watched, the small orange glow of a cigarette flared in the driver's seat. Somebody was sitting outside his house at 4 in the morning. His first instinct was to call the police. His second was that the police reported to a system, and the system had his name in it as a suspect in a federal fraud, and a call from Jacob Miller at 4 a.m. might do nothing but put him one step closer to the frame. His third instinct, the one that won, was cold and clear and new. He wasn't going to hide in his own dark house. He picked up his phone, and with hands that had finally stopped shaking, he did the last thing they'd expect. He walked out his own front door in his socks down his own front walk, straight toward the parked car, and he lifted his phone and took a photo of the license plate with the flash on deliberately so they'd see him do it. The cigarette dropped. The engine roared to life. The car peeled away from the curb so fast it clipped a garbage can, and Jacob stood in the middle of his own street at 4 in the morning, in his socks, watching the taillights disappear, holding a photo of their plate. "That's right," he said out loud, to the empty street, his breath fogging. "Run. I've got your plate now. I've got everything now. Run all you want." He sent the plate photo to Hannah with 3 words. "They came tonight. Got their plate." Her reply came fast. She was awake too. Of course she was awake. Neither of them slept anymore. "Jacob, you can't do stuff like that. They could hurt you." They could, but they didn't. Because right now they still need it to look like an accident or a frame. They can't just make me disappear. It'd point straight at them with everything you and I have already put in 3 places. That's our armor, Hannah. As long as the evidence would outlive us, they have to be careful. The second it wouldn't... He stopped typing, started again. "That's why we file tomorrow. The second Reyes files were bulletproof. Killing us stops being useful. It becomes the worst thing they could do." He didn't sleep at all after that. At 9:15, he drove to Patricia Reyes's office downtown, checking his mirrors, taking a route he'd never taken, and Hannah was already there in the parking garage. And when she saw him, she did something neither of them expected. She crossed the garage fast and hugged him hard, the way you hug someone you were afraid you'd never see again. "You scared me last night," she said into his shoulder. "Walking up to that car. Don't do that again. I can't. I just got somebody in my corner. Don't make me watch you get taken away too." Jacob held her for a second. This woman who'd been alone her whole life, who'd carried her father's death and her own fear in silence for 6 weeks, and he understood that somewhere in the last 7 days, the two of them had stopped being strangers who shared a problem and become something he didn't have a word for yet. "I'm still here," he said. "I'm not going anywhere. Come on, let's go end this." Patricia Reyes was 50-something sharp-eyed no-nonsense with a corner office full of law books and framed newspaper clippings of cases she'd won. She listened for 2 hours without interrupting. She looked at every photo. She read every text. When Jacob showed her the archive documents with Hale's initials, she went very still, and then she took off her glasses and set them down. "Do you two understand what you have here?" she said. "We think so," Hannah said. "No, I don't think you do." Reyes leaned forward. "Digital fraud they can always argue about. Passwords get stolen, credentials get shared. It's murky. A good defense attorney can make a jury's eyes glaze over. But this..." She tapped the photo of the initial document. "This is a paper record generated automatically by the system that predates the digital manipulation with the CFO's own handwritten initials on a payment to a company that provably does not exist. This isn't evidence of fraud. This is a confession he didn't know he wrote." She looked at Jacob. "And your alibi for March 9th turns their whole frame into a liability. They didn't just fail to frame you. They built a frame so sloppy it points back at them. Mr. Miller, in 22 years, I have rarely seen a cleaner case walk into my office." Jacob felt the words land in his chest, like the first warmth after a long cold. "So we can win," he said. "We can win," Reyes said. "But I have to be honest with you both about what winning costs." She folded her hands. "The moment I file with the U.S. Attorney's Office, this becomes real, and it becomes public in a matter of days. They will know it was the two of you. They will come after your credibility with everything they have. Mr. Miller, they will drag your name through the mud, the widower with money problems. They'll say you're the real thief, pointing fingers to save yourself. Ms. Brooks, they'll call you a disgruntled new employee with a grudge. It will get ugly, and it will get personal. And there is a period, usually a few days between filing, and the point where the evidence is locked in and protected, where you are both extremely exposed. If either of you is going to get cold feet, now is the time. Once I file, there is no unfiling." Jacob and Hannah looked at each other across the table. "File it," they said at the same time. Reyes almost smiled. "I thought you'd say that. I'll have the filing ready by Monday morning. Over the weekend, I want you both to be careful, and I mean genuinely careful. Don't go anywhere alone if you can help it. Keep your phones charged. And Mr. Miller..." She looked at him hard. "Your daughter stays exactly where she is until this is over. Do not bring her home. Not for anything." The weekend was the longest of Jacob's life. He called Emma twice a day. She was doing okay at Grandma's, she reported, though. Grandma made her eat vegetables at every single meal, which she considered a form of injustice. Hearing her complain about broccoli was the best sound in the world. It meant she was safe. It meant she was still a kid, still whole, still untouched by the things swallowing her father's life. Saturday passed, Sunday passed, Monday was the day. Monday morning, Reyes would file and the frame would flip, and the men who'd chosen the nobody would learn what the nobody had built. Jacob almost made it. Sunday night, 11 p.m. His phone rang. Not a text this time. A call. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer. Then he did, because he was done being afraid of his own phone. "You've had a busy week, Mr. Miller." A man's voice, smooth, calm, older. Jacob had heard that voice before 2 years ago at a retirement dinner giving a speech. Marcus Hale, the CFO himself, calling him directly. "I'll be brief, because I respect your time, and frankly, I've come to respect you a great deal this week. I underestimated you. I don't say that often." Jacob said nothing. He turned on the recording app on his phone with his thumb silent and let Hale talk. "You've caused me quite a bit of inconvenience," Hale went on, "but I'm a practical man, and practical men make deals rather than messes. So here's what I'm offering one time. There's a position opening up, Regional Logistics Director, 90,000 more a year than you make now. Company car, full relocation if you want a fresh start somewhere warm, somewhere your daughter might like. Yours on Monday. All you have to do is nothing. Don't file anything. Don't say anything. Take the promotion. Take the money. Take your little girl somewhere nice, and forget you ever met a woman named Hannah Brooks." There it was. The bribe. The one every man like Hale keeps in his pocket for the ones who won't scare. "And if I don't?" Jacob asked quietly. Hale's voice didn't change. Stayed smooth, stayed warm, and that was the most frightening part. "Then I'm afraid the evidence is what the evidence is, Mr. Miller. 11 federal violations. Your credentials, your name, your motive. A widower drowning in debt, stealing from flood victims. It's a very sad story. The kind that ends with a man in prison and a little girl raised by her grandmother wondering why her father did such a terrible thing." A pause. "I'd hate for it to end that way. I really would. I like you. That's why I'm making the call myself. Take the deal, Jacob. Be a smart man. Be a small man for one more week and keep everything you love. Or be a hero and lose all of it." And Jacob Miller, standing alone in his empty kitchen at 11 o'clock on a Sunday night, holding a phone that was recording every word, finally understood something. This was the real test. Not the archive, not the parked car, not the conference room. This. The moment they offered him everything he'd ever wanted, wrapped around the price of everything he'd become. He thought about his wife telling him not to be a small man. He thought about Hannah's father dying while he waited for help that men like Hale had already stolen. He thought about Emma at Grandma's complaining about broccoli safe because her father hadn't lain down. He thought about all of it. And then he gave Marcus Hale his answer. "You said you underestimated me," Jacob said, and his voice was calm and clear and did not shake at all. "You're still doing it. You think I want your money. You think I've been fighting for a better job." He almost laughed. "I'm not fighting to win, Mr. Hale. I passed winning a week ago. I'm fighting because a woman's father died waiting for the help you stole, and because you put my name on it, and because you sent a man to count my daughter's windows, and because someday Emma's going to ask me what I did when the powerful men tried to buy me, and I am going to be able to look her in the eye. That's worth more than $90,000. That's worth more than everything you have. And you'll never understand that because you've never in your life loved anything more than you love yourself." Silence on the line. When Hale spoke again, all the warmth was gone. What was left underneath was flat and cold, and for the first time, a little afraid. "Then you've made your choice," Hale said. "And whatever happens to you now, remember that I gave you a way out. Remember that this is your doing." "No," Jacob said. "It's yours, all of it. And I've got it recorded, by the way. Every word. The promotion, the threat, all of it. So thank you for the call, Mr. Hale. You just handed me the last piece." He hung up before Hale could respond. His hand was shaking, but he was smiling a fierce, terrible smile because he'd done it. He'd stared down the CFO and he'd gotten it all on tape. He was still smiling when the first brick came through his living room window. It hit the floor and skidded across the hardwood glass, exploding across the room, and Jacob threw himself sideways on instinct. A second window shattered. Then he heard it, the whump of something catching the orange light blooming against his front curtains, the smell of gasoline. They weren't waiting for Monday. Hale's polite call had been the goodbye. They were burning his house down with him inside it, and with it they thought every piece of evidence a man could keep in a home. Jacob scrambled across the floor toward the kitchen table where his case sat. The photos, the drive, the receipt, all of it as smoke started to fill the room, and the fire climbed the curtains behind him. They'd taken his patience. They'd taken his caution. Now they were trying to take the last thing, the truth itself, and burn it down to ash in his own living room. And Jacob Miller, on his hands and knees in the smoke, reached for the one thing that could still save him. His hand closed around the strap of the bag before his brain finished the thought. He'd packed everything into one bag 2 nights ago, some instinct telling him to keep it portable, keep it ready, and thank God he had, because there was no time now to gather anything. The smoke was coming down like a ceiling, lowering onto him, and he stayed low, crawling the bag over his shoulder, and he did not go for the front door. The front door was where they'd want him to go. The front door was lit up like a torch, and whoever threw those bricks was still out there in the dark. And if Jacob came stumbling out the front coughing and blind, that was a man who could have a very convenient accident, a man overcome by smoke, a tragedy, a widower who lost everything and finally lost himself too. He could see the story they'd write. He could see it clear as day, even with his eyes streaming. So he went to the back. He crawled through the kitchen, through the smoke, and he went out the back door low and fast, and he did not run across his own lit-up yard. He went along the side of the house in the dark, staying against the wall, the bag clutched to his chest, and he made it to the neighbor's hedge, and through it, and out onto the next street over, and only then 3 houses down, hidden behind a parked truck, did he stop and let himself breathe and cough and shake. His house was burning behind him. 11 years in that house. The room where Emma was born, almost they'd nearly not made it to the hospital. The mantel with his wife's picture and his 10-year plaque. All of it going up. And Jacob crouched behind a stranger's truck and watched the orange glow climb into the sky, and he did not feel grief. Grief would come later. Right now he felt something colder and clearer and more useful. He felt certainty. Because they'd just made their last and biggest mistake. Arson wasn't a scare. Arson wasn't a bribe. Arson was a felony, a violent one. And it meant Marcus Hale had run out of clean options and gone to the dirty ones, and dirty options leave marks. Gasoline leaves marks. Bricks have fingerprints. Somebody had to be here to throw them, which meant somebody could be seen, could be traced, could be flipped. He pulled out his phone with a shaking hand and called 911, and he did it as a witness, not a victim, which was its own kind of armor. I'm calling to report a fire. A house fire on Maple. I think it was set. I saw 2 people run from the yard. He gave the address. He did not give his name. Then he hung up and called Hannah. They burned my house, he said, and his voice was strange to his own ears, flat and fast. Just now. Bricks and gasoline through the windows. I got out the back with the bag. I've got everything. The photos, the drive, the receipt. And Hannah, listen to me 20 minutes ago. Hale called me himself. He offered me a promotion to walk away. 90 grand and a company car to forget your name. And when I said no, he threatened me, and then he hung up, and then the bricks came. He was moving now, walking fast down the dark street away from the fire. I recorded it. The whole call. His voice, the bribe, the threat, all of it. It's on my phone right now. There was a sound on the other end like Hannah had stopped breathing. He called you himself? She said. Hale? He actually got on the phone himself. He said he respected me. He said he underestimated me. He said take the money and be a small man for 1 more week. Jacob laughed, and it came out wrong, half a sob. And then he tried to burn me alive in my own living room 2 minutes later. That's who we're dealing with. That's what your father's relief money bought. A man who'll set a house on fire and sleep fine. Where are you? Are you hurt, Jacob? Where are you right now? I'm okay. I'm walking. I'm a few streets over. My car's still in the driveway. I can't go back for it. They might still be there. He stopped under a dark tree, chest heaving. I need you to call Reyes. Right now, I don't care that it's midnight. Tell her they torched my house the night before she files. Tell her I recorded a call from Hale. Tell her everything just changed. I'm calling her right now. Jacob, come here. Come to my place. You've got nowhere else, your house is gone? Come here. You shouldn't be walking around alone in the dark after what they just did. He hesitated for half a second, the careful old Jacob wanting to say no, wanting to not be a burden, wanting to keep his distance. Then the new Jacob, the one who'd walked up to a car at 4 a.m. and photographed the plate, said, I'm coming. Text me the door code. And Hannah, copy that recording the second I send it to you. 3 places. Do it before anything else. He sent her the audio file while he walked. He watched the little bar fill and the message deliver, and only when it said delivered did some of the weight come off his chest, because now the recording existed outside his phone, outside his burning house, outside anything Hale could reach. It was armor. Every copy was armor. He got to Hannah's building at 12:40 in the morning, smelling of smoke, his hands black with soot, the bag still clutched to his chest like a child. She opened the door before he could knock, and she looked at him at the state of him, and her face crumpled. Oh, Jacob. I'm okay. You're not okay. Look at you. You're covered in... She pulled him inside and shut the door and locked it all 3 locks, and then she just stood there, looking at him, like she couldn't believe he was real, that he'd walked out of a burning house and across the city and was standing in her apartment alive. I got everything out, he said, holding up the bag like it explained anything. The evidence. I got it out. I don't care about the evidence right now. Her voice broke. I care that you almost Jacob, they tried to kill you. This stopped being about a file a long time ago. They tried to kill you tonight. I know. And it's my fault. It's my fault I dragged you into... Hannah. He put the bag down. He took her by the shoulders. We already had this fight. You didn't drag me into anything. But I'll tell you what you did do. You gave me back my life. You understand that? 3 years I was a dead man, walking, going to work, coming home, keeping my head down, waiting to die quietly. And then you got in my car in the rain, and you scared the hell out of me, and you made me fight for the first time since my wife died, and I have never... His voice cracked. I have never felt more alive than I have this week. Even tonight. Even with my house on fire. I feel awake. You did that. So don't you dare stand here and apologize to me. Don't you dare. She was crying. He was close to it, and for a long moment they just stood there in her small apartment at nearly 1 a.m, 2 people who a week ago had been strangers holding on to each other because there was no one else in the world who understood. Reyes called at 1 a.m. Hannah put her on speaker. Tell me exactly what happened, Reyes said, and her voice was wide awake and hard as steel. Jacob told her. The call from Hale, the bribe, the threat, the bricks, the fire, the recording. Reyes was silent for a moment when he finished. Mr. Miller, she said, I need you to understand something, and I need you to hear it clearly. Up until tonight we had a very strong fraud case. Financial crime, white collar. The kind of thing that gets litigated for 2 years and maybe ends in a plea deal and some fines. A pause. Tonight Marcus Hale committed arson and attempted murder. And if that recording is what you say it is, he did it after personally offering you a bribe to suppress federal evidence. That is not white collar anymore. That is violent felony. That is the kind of thing that does not get litigated for 2 years. That is the kind of thing where the FBI kicks in a door. Another pause. You may have just handed me the case of my career. But Jacob, it also means you are in far more danger tonight than you were this morning. A man who commits arson to stop you is a man who cannot afford for you to reach Monday. Do you understand? You need to stay exactly where you are. Do not go outside. Do not go back to that house. I am making calls tonight right now to people I know at the Bureau, and I am moving our timeline up. We are not filing Monday. We are filing tonight. As an emergency disclosure, I want federal protection on both of you by morning. Chutombam. Jacob and Hannah looked at each other. Do it, Jacob said. File it tonight. Get us to morning. They did not sleep. Reyes worked the phones. Jacob and Hannah sat in her apartment with the lights off and the blinds drawn, and Jacob kept the bag between his feet, and every car that passed on the street below made both of them freeze until it was gone. Around 2:30, Hannah made coffee. Neither of them drank. Around 3, she said quietly into the dark, "Can I tell you something? Anything. When I found those invoices 6 weeks ago and I realized what they were, and I realized my name and your name were tangled up in it, I thought about just deleting the whole thing and quitting and moving again. Starting over somewhere new like I always do. I've done it 4 times. New city, new job, no friends, nobody who knows me. It's easier. You can't lose people if you never let anybody get close." Her voice was small in the dark. "But then I thought about my dad waiting for help that never came dying alone, because some man in an office decided the money was better in his pocket. And I couldn't do it. I couldn't be one more person who saw it happen and looked away." She was quiet for a moment. "I thought I was going to have to do it alone. I always do everything alone. And then there was you." Jacob didn't say anything for a while. Then he reached over in the dark and found her hand and held it. "You're not alone," he said. "Whatever happens tomorrow, you hear me? You're not alone anymore. Neither of us is." At 6:15 in the morning, Reyes called back and her voice had changed. There was electricity in it now. "It's done," she said. "I filed the emergency disclosure at 4 a.m. I have been on the phone with an assistant U.S. attorney and 2 FBI agents for the last 90 minutes. Jacob, your recording, they've heard it. They played it 3 times. An agent named Torres used a word I don't hear federal agents use. He said, and I quote, 'This is a gift.'" She took a breath. "There are agents en route to Hannah's apartment right now to take you both into protective custody and to formally collect the evidence. There are separate agents en route to the company. And Jacob," her voice softened just slightly, "they pulled the archive, the paper files, before Hale could get to them. Your photos told them exactly where to look, and the originals were still there. Hale's initials in his own hand on 4 payments to companies that don't exist. It's real. It's all real, and now it's in federal hands and it cannot be burned or deleted or rewritten. You did it. You 2 actually did it." Hannah made a sound that was half laugh and half sob and put her hand over her mouth. Jacob sat very still, and the thing that came over him wasn't triumph, not yet. It was something quieter and heavier, the feeling of a weight he'd carried so long he'd forgotten it was there, finally, slowly beginning to lift. "It's not over," he said. "Is it? He's still out there." "Hale." "No," Reyes admitted. "It's not over. He'll be arrested today, but a man like that has lawyers and money and a lifetime of practice at slipping loose. He'll fight. He'll try to bury both of you under his version of the story. The next months are going to be hard. But Jacob, for the first time, you're not fighting him from underneath. You're not the nobody he framed. You're the federal witness whose recording is going to put him away. The ground just moved. He's the one underneath now." The agents came at 7 a.m. 2 of them, a man and a woman, badges and quiet competence, and they took the bag, logged every item, and Jacob felt strange handing it over, this thing he'd guarded with his life for a week, but he understood that handing it over was the whole point. It was safe now. It was theirs now. It would survive now, no matter what happened to him. Agent Torres, the one who'd called it a gift, shook Jacob's hand at the door. "Mr. Miller," he said, "I've worked financial crime for 11 years. Most of the time these things stay buried because the people who see them are too scared to talk, and the ones who aren't scared don't have proof. You had both, scared and proof, and you talked anyway." He shook his head. "You're going to have a hard few months. But you should know you did the thing almost nobody does. You want to know how rare it is? Half my cases die because a witness backs down after the first threat. You got your house burned down and you filed anyway. That's not nothing. That's the whole ballgame. They drove Jacob and Hannah to a hotel under another name agents outside the door, and for the first time in a week, Jacob lay down on a bed and knew more or less that no one was going to throw a brick through the window. He called Emma the second he could. "Daddy!" Her voice bright and whole and safe. "Grandma let me have pancakes with chocolate chips. She never lets me have chocolate chips." Jacob closed his eyes and let her voice wash over him. The small, ordinary miracle of a 10-year-old talking about pancakes alive, untouched safe, and he thought he might come apart with the relief of it. "That sounds amazing, Bug. Are you okay? You sound funny." "I'm okay. Better than okay. The work problem, it's getting fixed. Some people who were doing bad things are going to get in trouble now. The good kind of trouble. The kind that means they can't hurt anybody anymore." "Did you fix it? You by yourself?" "Not by myself. I had help. A friend and a good lawyer and some people with badges. But Bug..." His voice went thick. "I didn't lie down. I want you to remember that. Whatever you hear people say about your daddy in the next little while, whatever ends up in the news, you remember that I did not lie down. I stood up, like I promised you." "I never thought you'd lie down," Emma said matter of fact, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "You're my dad." And that of everything nearly finished him. The arrests happened that afternoon. Jacob and Hannah watched it on the hotel television, the local news, then the national feed, picking it up by evening. The company's stock cratered. The disaster relief fraud, they called it. Millions stolen from flood and wildfire, and hurricane victims over the better part of a decade, funneled through shell companies, laundered through fake contractors. And then the names the perp, walks the men and women in suits with jackets over their heads, being led out of the glass building where Jacob had moved freight for 11 years. Karen Vale from Legal. The woman who'd smiled at him like a knife across the conference table. Roger Denton, VP of Operations. And then last the one the cameras wanted most. The one whose face was on the wall in the lobby. The one who'd given Jacob a plaque 2 years ago and called him a small man on the phone the night before. Marcus Hale in handcuffs was walked out of the building past 100 cameras. And for a moment, the footage caught his face, and it was not the smooth, confident face from the retirement speeches. It was gray and stunned, and underneath afraid the face of a man who had spent his whole life certain that people like him never got walked out in handcuffs, that the rules were for other people, for small people, for nobodies, like the warehouse manager he'd tried to burn alive. Jacob watched the man who'd tried to destroy him get put into the back of a federal vehicle, and he waited to feel triumph, and it didn't come the way he expected. What came instead was Hannah's hand finding his, and the two of them sitting on the edge of a hotel bed watching the powerful fall, and Jacob thinking of a man in Iowa who'd died waiting for help that this exact machine had stolen, and thinking that maybe in some small way, some of that was answered now. "My dad," Hannah whispered, watching the screen, tears running down her face. He would have Jacob, he would never have believed it. That it could actually be them. That somebody would actually... She couldn't finish. "He'd be proud of you," Jacob said. "You didn't look away. You're the reason it's them in the handcuffs and not us." "We're the reason," she said. "Both of us." The next months were exactly as hard as Reyes had promised. Hale's lawyers came at Jacob with everything just like she'd said. The widower with money troubles, the disgruntled employee, the frame-up story, turned inside out. There were depositions, and there was press, and there were days Jacob wanted to disappear. But every time it got bad, there was the recording. There was Hale's own voice offering the bribe, making the threat hours before the fire. There were his initials in his own hand on the impossible payments. There was the paper that remembered. And there was Emma's voice on the phone every night, and Hannah beside him in every deposition, and Rhea's relentless, brilliant, tearing every lie apart as fast as they could build it. And there was one more thing Jacob hadn't seen coming. The thing that finally broke the case wide open. The thing that turned the fight from a war they might win into one they could not lose. It came, of all places, from Emma. Reyes called on a Tuesday evening, and there was something careful in her voice. "Jacob, I need to ask you something, and I need you to think hard before you answer. During all of this, did Emma ever say anything about overhearing something? Anything at all? Before this started, Jacob went cold. Why? Because we've been building the timeline and there's a gap. A meeting months ago, before any of this, where we believe Hale and Vale and Denton discussed the whole scheme out loud. We have records that the meeting happened. We have no idea what was said in it. And in tracking the location, we found something strange. It was held at an offsite, a company family day, at a park. Reyes paused. Your daughter's school had a field trip to that same park that same afternoon. The dates match exactly. Jacob's heart began to pound. He thought of Emma weeks and weeks ago before any of this, mentioning offhandedly that she'd heard some grown-ups from a company talking mean about people, that she thought it was rude that she'd told him about it, and he'd been half listening, distracted, tired, a single father with too much on his mind, and he'd said that's not nice, bug, and thought nothing more of it. Oh my God, Jacob said. She told me, months ago. She said she heard some men from a company saying mean things about people who lost their houses. She said one of them laughed about it. I thought she'd misheard something. I told her not to worry about it. Reyes, she was there. My daughter was in that park. She heard them. There was a silence on the line so total, Jacob could hear his own blood. Jacob, Reyes said slowly, your 10-year-old daughter may be an eyewitness to the single conversation we cannot otherwise prove. The one where they said it out loud. The one that turns fraud into conspiracy. A breath. The men who burned your house down. The men who photographed her at school to frighten you. They had no idea at all that the little girl they were using as a threat had already heard the whole thing with her own ears months before and told her father and been told not to worry about it. Jacob sat down hard on the edge of the hotel bed, and something enormous moved through him. Something that started as terror and turned slowly into a kind of awe. They'd photographed Emma to frighten him. They'd counted her windows. They'd made her a piece on the board. And all along the whole time the child they'd threatened had been carrying the one thing that could finish them, holding it in her small hands without even knowing what it was. You're not putting my daughter on a witness stand, Jacob said, and his voice shook. She's 10. I won't have her in a courtroom near those men. I would never, Reyes said gently. Never. There are protected ways for a child to give testimony, ways they never have to see a defendant, ways that keep them completely safe. And Jacob, we may not even need her to testify at all. Because the moment Hale's lawyers learn that there's a child witness who heard the conversation, who told her father about it in real time, months before any of this, with no possible motive, no grudge, no financial stake, just a kid who heard grown-ups being cruel and thought it was wrong. Reyes's voice was quiet and certain. That's when they stop fighting. That's when they come asking for a deal. Because you cannot cross-examine the innocence of a 10-year-old who was just on a field trip. There's no angle. There's no attack. She's the one witness they cannot touch. And that was how it ended in the end. Not with a dramatic trial, but with the thing Reyes predicted. When Hale's team learned about Emma, learned that the frightened father's daughter had been an accidental witness to their own words, learned that everything connected the paper and the recording and the alibi, and now a child with no motive who'd heard them say it out loud, the fight went out of them. The pleas came one by one. Denton first, then Vale, then last and hardest. Marcus Hale himself, the man who'd been so certain the rules were for other people, signing his name to a confession in exchange for the mercy of a sentence with an end to it. The night the news came that Hale had pled, Jacob sat with Hannah in the small apartment that had become a kind of home, and he didn't feel like celebrating. He felt like a man setting down something he'd carried up a mountain. He called Emma and told her the bad men had admitted what they did and that they couldn't hurt anybody anymore, and that it was over. Because I heard them at the park, Emma asked. Grandma said I helped. You helped more than anybody, Bug, Jacob said, and his voice broke on it. You have no idea. You're the bravest person I know. You heard something wrong and you told the truth about it even when you were little, even when nobody was listening. That's the whole thing. That's everything. I'm not little, Emma said. I'm 10. Jacob laughed wet and full, and beside him, Hannah laughed too. And for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, the fear was gone, all the way, gone, and what was left in its place was quieter and warmer. And finally safe. The pleas didn't fix everything at once. That was the thing nobody tells you Jacob learned. You imagine the day the bad men admit what they did will be the day the sky clears and the weight lifts and you walk out into a new life. It isn't. The day Hale pled Jacob was still a man without a house, without a job, with his name half buried under months of ugly headlines that a lot of people had believed. Justice came, but it came slow, and it came with a bill. He and Emma moved back in with each other 3 weeks after Hale's plea into a small rented place across town because their house was gone, only a black square of foundation left where 11 years of their life had stood. The first night in the new place, Emma walked through every room, slowly taking it in, and then she said, "It doesn't smell like us yet." And Jacob said, "It will bug. Give it time. We'll make it smell like us." And she nodded like that was a serious and reasonable answer, which it was. The company Jacob had worked at for 11 years collapsed. Not all at once, but the way a building comes down after the demolition charge goes off a slow lean and then a rush. The fraud had gutted it. The lawsuits from the victims, from the shareholders, from the government finished it. And Jacob, who had moved freight in that warehouse for 11 years, who had a plaque that burned up in his living room, was out of a job, along with 2,000 other people who'd had nothing to do with any of it. That was the part that ate at him. The men at the top had stolen and gotten caught, and the people at the bottom had lost their paychecks. Ray Coleman, who'd tried to warn him in the yard. All the men on the dock, gone scattered looking for work. Jacob found Ray at a diner 2 months after the collapse and bought him breakfast and apologized. And Ray put down his fork and looked at him. Apologize for what? For all of it. The company's gone. Your job's gone. If I'd just kept my head down like you told me. Jacob. Ray's voice was hard. You stop that right now. The company wasn't killed by you telling the truth. The company was killed by them stealing for 10 years. You didn't do that. They did that. You just turned the lights on. Don't you dare carry their crime on your back. You hear me? Don't you dare. Ray picked his fork back up. I got a new job already over at the distribution center on Sprague. Half the guys did. We land on our feet. We always do. That's what guys like us do. He pointed the fork at Jacob. You want to feel bad about something? Feel bad that you didn't trust me enough to tell me what was going on. I'd have helped you. That's the only thing you did wrong all year. Jacob sat with that a long time. I didn't want you to be Petey. I know. Ray's face softened. But you should have let me decide that. That's the thing about you, Jacob. You always want to carry it alone. You did it after your wife. You did it this whole year. You carry everything alone like it's the noble thing. He shook his head. It isn't. It's just lonely. And you don't have to do it anymore. That conversation stayed with Jacob. He turned it over for days. Because Ray was right, and Hannah had said nearly the same thing in the dark of her apartment months before, about how she did everything alone, how you can't lose people if you never let anybody close. 2 people, 2 different lives, the same wound. And Jacob started to understand that the thing he'd thought was strength, the head down, the carrying alone, the not being a burden, had been its own kind of hiding. A quieter cousin of the fear. The money question was real, and it was frightening. Jacob had savings that were nearly gone. He had a daughter to feed. He had no house and no job and a name that a lot of employers Googled before they called back. There were nights in the new rented place after Emma was asleep when the old fear came creeping back, the one that whispered that maybe Hale had been right. Maybe he should have taken the $90,000 and the company car. Maybe being a small man for 1 more week would have left him with a house and a job and a future instead of ashes and headlines. He never told Emma about those nights. But he told Hannah because he'd learned finally to stop carrying it alone. Some nights I wonder if it was worth it. He admitted to her once quietly over the phone near midnight. Is that terrible? After everything? The house is gone. The job's gone. And Hale's going to prison, but he'll be out in a few years, and I'll still be starting over at 43 with nothing. Some nights I wonder. Hannah was quiet for a moment. Can I tell you what my dad would have given to have a man like you turn those lights on when it was his money getting stolen, she said. He died waiting Jacob. He died in a hospital bed still believing the help was coming, that somebody in an office was going to do the right thing. Nobody did. Not one person stood up. And you're sitting there at midnight wondering if standing up was worth it. Her voice thickened. It was worth it to every family that's going to get real relief now, because the machine that ate it is broken. It was worth it to me. And someday when Emma's grown, it's going to be worth it to her that her father was the man who did the thing almost nobody does. You didn't lose everything, Jacob. You lost a house and a job. You kept the only things that were ever really yours, your daughter, your name, the real one, the true one, and yourself. Jacob didn't say anything for a while. Then he said, How'd you get so wise? I had a lot of lonely years to think, Hannah said. I'm just glad they're over. The thing that turned it around, the real break, came from a direction Jacob never expected. Patricia Reyes called him one afternoon, and there was something in her voice he'd never heard before, something almost shy. Jacob, I want to run something by you. There's an organization I've done work for, a nonprofit. They advocate for disaster victims. They help families navigate relief systems, fight for people who get lost in the paperwork. The way, she paused, the way Hannah's father did. They're expanding. They saw the case. They saw everything you did. And their board asked me to ask you something. A breath. They want to talk to you about a job, running their operations. They need somebody who understands logistics, who understands how relief is supposed to move, and who understands from the inside how it gets stolen. They said, and I'm quoting the board chair here, we want the man who burned down his own life to protect flood victims he never met. Jacob sat down. I move freight, Patricia. I ran a warehouse. I don't run organizations. You ran an investigation that took down a CFO with nothing but a receipt and a photograph and the refusal to lie down, Reyes said. You built a federal case as a hobby at night while they threatened your child. Don't tell me you can't run operations for a nonprofit. Just go talk to them. That's all. Just talk. He talked to them. And 2 weeks later, Jacob Miller, who had spent 11 years moving freight in a warehouse, and 3 years before that in other warehouses, who had never in his life imagined himself as anything but a quiet man with a badge and a clipboard, was offered a job as the director of operations for an organization whose entire purpose was making sure the help actually reached the people waiting for it. Making sure no more men in Iowa died in hospital beds, still believing it was coming. He took it. Of course he took it. And the first day he walked into that office, a small, crowded place full of people who cared too much and got paid too little. He thought about Hannah's father and about the machine that had eaten his relief, and he thought, I'm going to spend the rest of my working life making that machine smaller. And it felt less like a job than like a debt he was finally allowed to pay. Hannah came to work there too eventually. It made a strange kind of sense. She ran their fraud oversight, the very thing she'd stumbled into by accident. The thing that had nearly gotten them both killed turned now into a job with a title and a purpose. She was the one who watched the money, who checked the vendors, who made sure the thing that killed her father could never quietly grow again inside the walls of the place meant to prevent it. She was very good at it. She had, after all, more reason than anyone alive to be exactly that vigilant. And the two of them, Jacob and Hannah, went on being whatever it was they'd become, which took a long time to have a name. It was not at first what people assume when they hear a story like theirs. There was no sudden romance in the rain, no dramatic kiss in a parking lot. What there was slower and deeper and more real than that. There was a man and a woman who had been strangers, who had been thrown together in the worst week of both their lives, who had watched each other refuse to break, who had held on in the dark when there was no one else to hold on to. Trust came first. Trust came long before anything else, because trust was the thing both of them had spent their lives unable to give. And it was Emma in the end who said the thing the two adults were too careful to say. It happened at the town's summer festival, almost a year to the day from the night in the rain. Jacob and Hannah and Emma were there together the way they'd been together for months by then. Hannah coming to dinner most nights. Hannah at Emma's school play. Hannah's laugh, a normal sound in the house. And Emma, 10 going on 11. Now all sharp eyes and no patience for grown-ups. Being slow, took Hannah's hand as they walked through the festival and looked up at her and asked the question plainly. The way children ask the questions, adults are too frightened to. "If you're already family," Emma said, "why don't you just live with us?" Hannah stopped walking. Her eyes filled. She looked at Jacob and Jacob looked at her, and neither of them said anything for a moment, because the child had said it had reached past all their carefulness and named the thing, and there was nothing to do but let it be named. "Bug?" Jacob started gently. That's a grown-up thing, that's not." "Why?" Emma said with the devastating logic of a 10-year-old. "You're happy when she's here. You laugh more. You don't do the fake laugh anymore, you do the real one. And she's happy here, and I'm happy, so why does everybody keep pretending?" She looked between the two adults, exasperated. "You're all bad liars, every single one of you." And Hannah laughed and cried at the same time and crouched down to Emma's level and took both her hands. "You know what?" Hannah said, her voice breaking. "You're right. You're completely right. We are bad liars." "I know," Emma said. "I'm a very good noticer." "You are," Hannah said. "You're the best noticer there is." She looked up at Jacob over the top of Emma's head, and something passed between them, a whole year of it. The rain and the fire and the fear and the holding on, and Jacob felt the last careful wall inside him, the one he'd built the day his wife died, the one that said, "Don't let anyone that close, because you can only lose them," finally quietly come down. "She gets it from her mother," Jacob said, his voice rough. "The noticing." He looked at Hannah. "And she's right. She's right about all of it. I do laugh more. I stopped doing the fake one about 6 months ago. I was too scared to say it. After everything. I got so used to protecting the one thing I had left that I forgot you're allowed to let it grow." "I've been alone my whole life," Hannah said. "I got so good at it, I forgot it wasn't the only way to be." "Then let's both stop being good at the wrong thing," Jacob said. That was it. That was the whole proposal, if you could call it that. Standing in the middle of a summer festival, with a 10-year-old holding both their hands, no ring, no speech. Just two people who had run out of reasons to be careful with each other. It wasn't the kind of thing that goes in a movie. It was better than that. It was true. They married the next spring, small in a backyard with Ray Coleman standing up for Jacob and Diane, of all people, crying in the front row. Diane, who had wanted custody, who had spent 3 years telling Jacob he was raising Emma wrong, had become, over the year of the fight, something Jacob never expected. An ally. Maybe even a friend. She'd watched him hand over the thing he loved most to keep it safe. And she'd watched him fight and lose everything and refuse to break. And somewhere in there she'd stopped seeing the man her daughter married as a mistake, and started seeing what her daughter had seen all along. "I owe you an apology that'll take the rest of my life," Diane told him at the wedding, gripping his arm. "I looked at you for 3 years, and I saw a man who wasn't enough for my granddaughter. And you turned out to be the strongest man I ever met. My daughter knew. My daughter always knew." She wiped her eyes. "She'd be so proud of you, Jacob, and she'd love that girl." She nodded toward Hannah. "She'd say you finally stopped hiding." Emma was the flower girl and the ring bearer, both because she refused to be limited to one job, and she walked down the makeshift aisle with a seriousness that made everyone laugh. And when Jacob and Hannah said their vows, Emma stood between them the whole time, holding both their hands, because that was where she belonged, and everyone knew it. Marcus Hale was sentenced that same spring, a few weeks before the wedding. The man who'd owned the building with his face on the lobby wall, who'd given Jacob a plaque and called him a small man, who'd offered $90,000 and then thrown bricks and gasoline through a family's windows, was sent to federal prison for a long time. long enough. Jacob didn't go to the sentencing. He'd thought he'd want to look the man in the eye one last time, but when the day came, he found he didn't need it. He was busy. He was helping Emma with a science project about moths, of all things, about how they fly toward light because they mistake it for the moon. And he found he'd rather be there at his kitchen table with his daughter than anywhere near Marcus Hale ever again. That was the real victory, he realized. Not the sentencing, not the perp walk on the news. The real victory was that Marcus Hale had become irrelevant to his life. The man had tried to make himself the center of Jacob's world, the thing Jacob feared, the thing that could destroy him. And now, he was just a name in an old news story, a man in a cell, someone Jacob thought about less and less. That was the deepest thing Jacob learned in the whole business. The powerful want you afraid of them, because fear is how they stay the center of your world. And the moment you stop being afraid, the moment you'd rather be at your kitchen table helping with a science project, they lose the only power they ever really had over you. The nonprofit grew. Under Jacob's operations and Hannah's oversight, it became one of the most trusted disaster relief organizations in the region and then beyond it. When the floods came to a town 3 states over, their trucks were the ones that got there first. And the money reached the families it was meant for. All of it, every dollar accounted for. Because a man who understood logistics and a woman who understood exactly how relief gets stolen were watching every step of the way. There was a family in that flooded town. An old man who'd lost his shop and the help reached him in 3 days, and Hannah cried when she heard about it, because it was 3 days, not 3 years, not never. And somewhere her father was 3 days too late, but this man was not. And that was the whole point. That was everything. That was the debt being paid one family at a time. Emma grew up. She stayed a good noticer. She talked sometimes at school about the year her dad took down a bunch of bad men who stole from flood victims, and her teachers thought she was exaggerating until they looked it up. She never once doubted through all of it that her father would win, because in her mind, there had never been any other possibility. He was her dad. Dads stood up. That was simply how the world worked in Emma's understanding of it, and Jacob spent the rest of his life trying to be worthy of that certainty, that unshakable 10-year-old faith that the good guys don't quit when it's smart to quit. Years later, when Emma was grown and about to leave for college, she asked her father the question directly, the one she'd been too young to ask when it happened. They were packing her room, and she stopped and said, "Dad, that year, when you took them down, were you ever scared you'd lose? Really scared?" And Jacob, older now, gray coming in at the temples, sat down on the edge of her half-packed bed and told her the truth the way he always had. "Every single day," he said. "I was scared every single day, Bug. Scared I'd lose you. Scared I'd lose the house, which I did. Scared I'd go to prison. Scared they'd hurt you. There wasn't one day I wasn't scared." "Then how'd you do it?" Jacob thought about it. He thought about a woman getting into his car in the rain. He thought about a dying wife telling him not to be a small man. He thought about a stranger counting his windows and a photograph of his daughter and a house on fire and a phone recording a bribe. He thought about all of it, the whole terrible, beautiful year that had broken his old life and given him the real one. "Being brave isn't not being scared," he said finally. "I used to think it was. I used to think brave people just didn't feel the fear. But that's not it at all. Brave is being scared to death and doing the right thing anyway. It's being scared and refusing to be small. Anybody can do the right thing when it's easy. The whole test is whether you'll do it when you're terrified and you've got everything to lose." He looked at his daughter, this remarkable person he'd raised alone and not alone. "They picked me because they thought I was a nobody who'd lie down. A quiet man with too much to lose and no fight in him. And they were half right. I was quiet. I am quiet. But quiet isn't the same as weak, Bug. Sometimes the quiet ones are just the ones who've been saving it up." Emma hugged him. Then the way she'd hugged him the night he packed her bag for Grandma's fierce and long. Except she was taller than him now, and it was different, and it was the same. "For what it's worth," she said into his shoulder, "you're the least small man I ever met." And Jacob Miller, who had once been a widower moving freight in a warehouse, a man they'd chosen precisely because they were certain he would never fight back, held his grown daughter in the room they were packing up, and knew with a certainty as deep and unshakable as her childhood faith in him that his wife had been right all those years ago, and that he had kept his promise, and that a good man is never a nobody, no matter how quiet he keeps, and that the ones who try to break a quiet man for loving something too much will learn every single time that there is nothing on this earth more dangerous or more unbreakable than a gentle man who has finally decided to stand. He had lost his house. He had lost his job. He had lost the quiet, careful, hidden life he'd built to keep the world at a safe distance. And in losing all of it, Jacob Miller had finally completely and forever found himself.